Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen.
Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 50, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It's late Thursday night, September the 1st, and I'm in the shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama, just so I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. It is soccer season around here, my babies. I'm an accidental soccer coach. If you listen to this show, you're well aware that we don't cover soccer in our sports segment of this show. We talk a lot of hoops because your boy has a jump shot. And I've grown up my whole life playing and watching, and as an adult even coaching basketball. We talk college football because I know that game as well. We don't talk soccer, but it is soccer season around here, and I'm an accidental soccer coach, okay? Last year, my daughter decided that she wanted to play soccer, and I'm all about my kids trying things out. And I don't know how you parent your kids, but I'm the type of parent that if my kid does something, I'm going to be a part of it. At least till I have raised them up and they are old enough to take care of themselves, I'm going to be a part of it, man. I'm not going to have my 5-year-old out there getting chewed out by some board short wearing, CrossFit doing knuckle dragger in a backwards visor who's taking out his failures as a high school linebacker on a bunch of children, okay? It's not how we roll in this house. My kid will be treated with respect, and I will be there to make sure of it, okay? So my daughter decided last year she wanted to try soccer, and I was an assistant coach. I love my children. You may not, and that's okay. But I love my children. I cut their sandwiches. Back in my day, that's how you knew if your parents loved you. If you showed up to school with a sandwich that was cut diagonally, you knew that child's parents loved them. If it was not cut at all, well, they had some struggles. And if it was cut sideways, the HR probably involved. So I was the assistant coach last year. My daughter had a lot of fun. She decided she wanted to play soccer again. And the guy that I coached with was a really good coach last season. He's not coaching this year. And my wife was filling out the form. She said, "Don't you want to coach?" I said, "No. Put me down as an assistant coach. I'll find somebody to coach with." And she put me down as a head coach. I'm an accidental soccer coach. I got a call from the lady that runs the league, and she said, our coaches meeting is on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. And I said, I will not be there. I am not a coach. And she said, we have you down as a coach. And I said, you have me down wrong. I am an assistant coach. And she said, we have you down as a head coach. And if you don't coach, we'll be one coach short. And there's a whole team of kids will have no one to coach them. So I'm an accidental soccer coach, okay? And I'm not from here. I did not grow up in this town. It's a small town in Alabama. And if you've ever dealt with rec leagues, youth sports in small towns, you know how it goes. I show up to the coaches meeting and everybody's nice, everything's okay, but it's very clear that these people all know each other. I'm the only one that doesn't know anybody else at the coaches meeting. And these people have coached youth soccer for several years. They know all the kids. They're making jokes about which kids can kick the ball, who can play goalie, who plays this position, yada, yada, yada. I don't know none of them children. And we're supposed to pick teams. Some of these coaches have showed up to this meeting with a whole roster already selected, or with 8 out of 10 players on their team already. I had 2 players, my daughter and a kid that I coached in basketball, who was like, hey, I want to be on your team, Coach Wes. So I look at these stacks of forms with kids who I don't know, with their names on them, and I'm just picking children, okay? I see that one kid is the youngest kid in the league, and I'm like, hey, that kid is on my team. He needs a coach that's going to be encouraging and patient and kind. He's on my team. I see that, hey, nobody wants to pick these 7-year-old girls. Hey, they're on my team. So it's going to be interesting to see if our team is any good, because I don't know soccer. I have not yet been given the rules, and our first 3 practices got rained out. It's been raining every day here. So we've had 1 practice, and hopefully we'll have a couple more next week before our first game. And I have not been given any soccer balls, any cones, or even any of the rules for the league. I've asked several times, what are the rules? What rules do we play under? And I've just been told, oh, I'll text them to you. So we might be terrible. But our kids are going to have fun, and they're going to have a coach that doesn't scream obscenities at them or mistreat them. And I told the parents, look, I'm going to try to help your child be a better soccer player. But even more than that, I'm going to make sure they have a good experience, okay? Yeah. So the 6-year-old daughter is playing soccer for her 2nd year. I'm excited to spend the time with her. And my 2-year-old, Malachi, he's playing soccer as well. Yeah, you heard that right. My 2-year-old son, they have a 2-year-old soccer league, which is basically just roll the ball out there and watch as they take turns crying or pushing each other down, saying my ball, picking it up and running away. The first practice the little man had, I can't coach both kids, so my wife is going to be there at his practices with him. And the first practice, he kicked the ball in the goal 3 times before practice started. His kicking leg is strong. He was looking like the best player on the field. Practice started. All the other kids ran out. And man just said, nah. My wife said, don't you want to come out here and kick the ball with your friends? And nah. Don't you want to come do what your team is doing? Nah. Don't you want to come meet your coach? Nah. He just passed. He just said, I pass. He just sat down on the sidelines and he ate some goldfish and he watched the entire practice. It's going to be an interesting season. It's going to be a lot of fun, both in the 2-year-old soccer league and also with my 6 and 7-year-old team that I accidentally wound up coaching. Got to learn about soccer. If you know anything about soccer, slide into my DMs with some plays. Diagram me some schematics. Help me with some X's and O's. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I'm going to spend time on my lunch break every day this week looking up 8-year-old soccer plays on YouTube because I'm an accidental soccer coach. I got home from the coaches meeting and I said, hey, sweetheart, as it turns out, you did not sign me up to be an assistant soccer coach. You signed me up to be the soccer coach. And she just said, huh. I think the fix was in. I also had an opportunity last week to visit my wife at work for the first time. She has a job that she's been in for a little while, hadn't got to meet her coworkers or see her office yet. She works with special needs adults. And last week, her and some of her coworkers, they put on events for these special needs adults. Some of them come to a day program. Some of them actually are residents of the place where she works, and they live there. And they're on a spectrum. So you have some folks that aren't even verbal. You have some folks that you would meet out on the street, and you wouldn't know them from anybody else. And but they put on events for these people to try and make sure that they have a good time, to make sure that they have opportunities to do stuff just like everybody else. And so my wife and a couple of her coworkers put on a luau. They brought in barbecue, they had tropical music playing, they had leis to put around the neck of all the individuals there. They had fresh fruit cut up, they had games for them to play, they had palm tree decorations up. It was really cool. And I was so proud of my wife and the work that she does, and I was moved. I was moved by the experience, to see the smiles that were brought to the faces of the individuals in their care, and to see how happy they were to be there together and to have such a joyous atmosphere full of celebration and full of vitality and full of life. It was a beautiful thing. And I just told her how proud I was of her. And I just told her that, your job really matters. You're really making a difference. And I don't know if you're a person of faith. It's okay if you're not. We have a big tent here in the shed. You're all welcome inside my shed, no matter what your beliefs are. But for me, it was really a picture of the kingdom of God. I've shared with you before that I happen to be a man of faith. And the kingdom of God is this idea that's presented within Scripture, right? That established within our world is another realm, another plane of existence simultaneously. You have the kingdom of the world where things are hierarchical, where things like position and power and wealth are what get you in and what make you have importance. And then you have an upside down kingdom in the kingdom of God. A place where everybody has worth simply because they're human, simply because they're made in the image of God. And those who are left out in the world are included in the kingdom of God. And those who can't find a place, those who are seen as unimportant, those who are on the margins of society, those who have baggage, those whose lives are messy, the people that others turn their nose up at, have a special place in the kingdom of God. And for me, it was a very moving and a very spiritual experience to step into a place full of adults that society has put a label on, that people might see as unimportant or less than or an inconvenience. And instead, they're being celebrated, and they've got a seat at the table, and they're being treated with dignity, and a party is being thrown for them. And really, that's what the kingdom of God is to me. It's about throwing a party for those that the rest of the world has left out. And it's a beautiful thing. So I wanted to talk about being an accidental soccer coach, and about my 2-year-old throwing himself into the grass and refusing to participate in his practice. But I also wanted to talk about this luau and the work that my wife and her coworkers are doing, because it matters and because it's important. And because we should never look past the worth of other people simply because they're different, or because society says that they're this or they're that, or puts a label on them. Everybody has worth simply because they're people, simply because they're made in the image of God. And what my wife and her coworkers did for those people, for those individuals, what they do for them on a daily basis, but what they did for them in throwing them a party, an extravagant party, for no other reason than because they wanted them to feel important and because they wanted them to have a good time. It was a beautiful thing, and it matters. And I couldn't be more proud to be married to the woman that I am. All right, let's get to some comments and corrections. 50 episodes, man. Our humble little show has reached 50 episodes. Surpassed 5,000 downloads, were listened to in 27 countries across the globe. We're a very big deal in India. Over 6,000 followers on Twitter now. And it's hard for me to believe. It really is. It's hard for me to believe Those are very modest accomplishments in comparison to some. But hey, I'm not into comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy, and this show has been a source of joy for me. It really has. I didn't know anything about podcasting when I got started with this, about microphones, editing software, pop filters, promotion. I just wanted to try something. I wanted to do something different. I thought it'd be fun, and I wanted to try. And here we are 50 episodes later with many more to come, and it feels good. It feels like an accomplishment. 50 episodes feels like a milestone. I'm proud of the audience that we've cultivated, this odd congregation of weirdos that I like to call tools that come from such different perspectives and backgrounds and different faiths and different parts of the country and the world, that vote differently, that root for different sports teams, that are interested in UFOs and Bigfoot and world news and college sports and the NBA and NFL. It's a different crowd, and I love it. I love interacting with you. I love building this community, and it's growing slowly but steadily, week after week. It's growing. So off the top, on episode 50, I want to say thank you to you, our listeners, for your continued support. Continue checking in online, sending those emails, continue listening, continue telling your friends about the show, and we'll keep growing this thing together. I couldn't do it without you. I can't thank you enough for listening. I do not take it for granted. And if you're not already, you can support the show by subscribing to our newsletter. It's only $4 a month. And you can subscribe by emailing us at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com and just saying, hey, I want more information about this newsletter. Or you can just send $4 to our Cash App, which is the Wes Anderson, THEWESANDERSON, all lowercase letters, no spaces. If you're not interested in the newsletter, that's okay too. How about sending us a one-time gift of $4 to our Cash App? Bless that Cash App. This show will always be free. I refuse to hide anything behind a paywall, and your generosity helps make that possible. I also want to give a special shout out to both Mexico and the UK. We have been on fire in both of those locales this last week, so thank you for listening, my friends in Mexico and the UK. Canada and Australia, where are you at? I'm calling you out. I haven't heard from you lately. I'm issuing a challenge. Check in. Get those downloads up this week, my Canadian friends. My friends down under. All right, no time for emails this week. Let's switch to this. Let's get to the news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. CDC overreported COVID-19 deaths by more than 70,000, writes the Daily Wire. Some college students disagree with Biden's massive handout, reports Fox Business. Democratic midterm outlook improves, says the Wall Street Journal. From Insider, Trump appeared to undermine his own claims that the FBI planned to classify documents in Mar-a-Lago. And finally, Elon Musk's commitment to free speech is bogus, and that is according to Slate. Our first story in the world of politics, former president of Honduras extradited to U.S. on drug trafficking charges. Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was president of Honduras for 8 years, was extradited to New York on Thursday to face charges of engineering a massive effort to flood the U.S. with cocaine. The rare extradition of a former head of state followed Hernandez's arrest in February at his home in Tegucigalpa, less than a month after he stepped down from office. The Justice Department accused him of participating in a violent drug trafficking operation that shipped 500 tons of cocaine from Venezuela and Colombia to the U.S. through Honduras. We allege that Hernandez corrupted legitimate public institutions in the country, including parts of the National Police, military, and National Congress, Attorney General Merrick Garland said on Thursday. And we allege that Hernandez worked closely with other public officials to protect cocaine shipments bound for the United States. Because of these alleged crimes, communities in the United States suffered, and the people of Honduras suffered as well. The charges say he received millions of dollars for shielding drug traffickers from arrest and for facilitating their shipments. Hernandez, 53, took bribes from some of the world's most notorious drug traffickers, including $1 million from Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the former head of the Sinaloa cartel, to protect his operations in Honduras, said Damian Williams, the U.S. attorney in Manhattan, where Hernandez will be prosecuted. A grand jury indictment unsealed Thursday says Hernandez used the money to enrich himself, finance his political campaigns, and commit voter fraud, including in connection with the 2013 and 2017 Honduran presidential elections. He abused his position as the president of Honduras to operate the country as a narco state in order to enrich himself and corruptly gain and maintain power, the charges say. Hernandez said on social media this year that the U.S. charges were based on the claims of drug traffickers and confessed assassins who were extradited by my government. A Honduran judge ruled last month that Hernandez could be extradited to the U.S. Juan Antonio Hernandez, the former president's brother, was sentenced to life in prison last year after he was convicted of drug trafficking and weapons violations. During his trial, federal prosecutors said his brother, then the president, agreed to use his country's military forces to provide security for drug traffickers. The extradition of Hernandez marks one of the few times that a former head of state has been brought to the U.S. to face charges. In 1990, Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega was arrested on drug trafficking charges during a U.S. military operation. He was convicted in federal court in Miami. Noriega died in 2017 at Hospital Santo Tomas in Panama City. That's Panama, not Panama City Beach, Florida, at age 83. So, the former president of Honduras has been extradited to the United States and is going to trial for bribery and drug trafficking. This is a wild story and is almost completely unprecedented. And it's a follow-up story, one of the main reasons I wanted to share it, because we covered this back when his brother was on trial last year. We covered the story. And we talked about how crazy it was then that during this trial, the trial of the brother of the president at the time of Honduras, how under cross-examination, the claims were made under oath that the president of another country was involved in protecting the cartel and making sure that hundreds of tons of drugs, primarily cocaine, were brought into the United States. It's absolutely wild. This is not something that happens normally, okay? Where even if we suspect that a head of a foreign government is involved in some illegal activity, it's not normal that they are extradited to the U.S. It's not normal that they are put on trial. And it's not normal that they go to prison. But it's looking like all of those things are going to happen in this instance and in this case. And the defense of the former president that all of the testimony against him comes from those who are part of the cartel, who are facing their own charges, who are assassins, who have already been found guilty of a litany of crimes. It's a pretty strong defense, okay? I mean, on the one hand, the guy has a point. On the other hand, evidence seems to be pretty clear that this guy is guilty of exactly what they say he's guilty of. And if they can find financial records that tie him to these cartels and to these drug kingpins, he's likely going to spend the rest of his life in an American prison. The former president of another country spending the rest of his life in an American prison. And I'm certainly not a fan of drug trafficking. I'm not a defender. But the conspiratorial side of me says it's very interesting that a foreign head of state and a foreign politician is going to spend the rest of his life in prison because he used his office to enrich himself and his friends. Like, hey, we might know some people guilty of those things over here as well. We might know some corporations. We might know a few politicians. We might know some people that are American citizens that engage in some similar activities in our country and in other countries as well. And they're not going to see the inside of a jail cell. They're not going to be a defendant in a courtroom. But hey, Merrick Garland, okay. Good job, I guess. Good job for going and getting the former president of Honduras. And if he's guilty, I hope that he does do time. I hope that he does pay penance. I hope that the evidence does bear out the crimes that he committed and he has to face the consequences of it. That's what justice looks like. But it's also striking that we have the ability to have former presidents of other countries extradited on charges, knowing good and well that other countries do not have the same privileges when it comes to our politicians and our business leaders and our billionaires. I just find it to be interesting. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying I find it to be interesting. And this story is a big one. It's almost unprecedented. The president of Honduras is going to go to prison for drug trafficking. And it all came out when his brother was on trial because members of the cartel and alleged assassins dropped a dime on the man. It seems like a movie. It seems like a Netflix original documentary, a 5-part series, a spin-off of Narcos. But it's real life, and this stuff happens all the time. And if we can get people who make it possible for drugs to flood into our country and across our borders, I'm all in favor of it. But I also notice what I notice, and I noticed it. Our next story in the world of politics: 580 service members died by suicide in 2020, new Pentagon report says. 580 service members died by suicide in 2020, the Pentagon announced September 30th when the Defense Department released its annual suicide report. The 580 deaths mark the most DoD has recorded in at least 5 years, with the active duty component accounting for 384, the reserve for 77, and the National Guard for 119. In the Air Force, 81 active duty members, 12 reservists, and 16 Air National Guard members committed suicide in the calendar year 2020, according to the report. The findings are troubling. Suicide rates among our service members and military families are still too high, and the trends are not going in the right direction, Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin III said in a statement accompanying the release of the report. This is a paramount challenge for our department. We must redouble our efforts to provide all of our people with the care and resources they need, to reduce stigmas and barriers to care, and to ensure that our community uses simple safety measures and precautions to reduce the risk of future tragedies. While the total numbers increased, the Defense Suicide Prevention Office found that the rate of suicides per 100,000 individuals did not increase by a statistically significant margin from 2019 to 2020, relieving some fears that the COVID-19 pandemic would lead to a surge. But that doesn't mean we're standing by, said Army Major General Clement S. Coward. That is an unfortunate name, but I digress. Acting Executive Director of the Office of Force Resiliency in a press briefing. When we start talking about the data and what it could indicate, we've always known that COVID and the measures to respond to it have presented unique challenges that would include risk factors for some folks. That's why we're not only continuing to monitor this, but we're also continuing to be relentless to mitigate the effects as much as we can. Based on rates per 100,000, the only component to see a statistically significant increase from 2019 to 2020 was the National Guard, which had seen a drop from 2018 to 19. The increase now puts the rate at roughly the same level it was in 2018. From a longer-term perspective, though, the active duty component has seen a statistically significant increase in suicide rates since 2015, going from 20.3 deaths per 100,000 to 28.7. As in years past, the rate of suicide continues to be highest among young enlisted men. Enlisted men younger than 30 years old made up 42% of the total force, but accounted for 63% of suicide deaths in 2020. The primary method also stayed the same. Firearms were used in nearly 69% of suicides in 2020. Part of it has to do with impulsivity. Younger individuals and males tend to have a higher level of impulsivity, Defense Suicide Prevention Officer Director Karen A. Orvis said in a press briefing when asked why young men make up such an outsized portion of suicide deaths. And when we're talking about our military community, I mentioned that the primary method of suicide death is by firearm. That is the most lethal method, about 90% lethal. This can be an impulsive act, and you can go from thinking to acting if you have the capability of that means within 10 minutes. While impulsivity is a factor, significant life events can play a role as well. Orvis noted that in the most recent data, about 40% of service members who died by suicide had had what she called a relationship challenge within the 90 days prior to their death. Financial issues have also been noted as a challenge in the lead up to some suicides. Those factors can be exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has generally led to more isolation for many people. Looking to combat that, Orvis said her office plans to expand some initiatives and introduce new ones as well. Part of that emphasis continues forward to this day, Orvis said, namely checking in one-on-one, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's through a phone call or a video message or text messaging, to know what's going on as a leader with your folks, so you can identify if there may be challenges going on at home in terms of relationship challenges or financial challenges, Orvis said. That's absolutely critical, and that's something we're stressing. Then we do have a number of new initiatives in place too. The new outreach campaign really targeting those healthy relationships and trying to change the perception of we all have relationship challenges, so we should be seeking out support and seeking help. Also, as a part of the annual report, the Pentagon included results from its first ever Quick Compass survey of active duty members, in which the department asked service members about their beliefs on firearms and suicide risk. The survey, Orvis said, revealed that the majority of respondents held beliefs about firearms and suicide that run contrary to academic research and data. In particular, 56% of responders said having a firearm in the house did not increase the risk of suicide, and 66% said the way firearms are stored had no impact on suicide risk. Studies have shown the opposite to be true in both cases. While the presence of a firearm does not cause someone to be suicidal, research does tell us that storing a loaded firearm at home increases the risk of dying by suicide up to 4 to 6 times, Orvis said. Such misconceptions can hinder suicide prevention efforts in our military community and across our nation. Knowing the facts may also allow us to take life-saving steps to help our loved ones. The Veterans Crisis Hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for veteran service members and their family and friends who need help. That number is 1-800-273-8255. Again, that's 800-273-8255. And those in need can also visit www.veterancrisisline.net. So, the most recent data we have on suicides committed by those who have made it their career to serve their country and to protect us and our freedoms is from 2020. And it shows that 580 of our service members took their own lives. That's 580 sons and daughters and husbands and wives and sisters and brothers and moms and dads and friends. 580. And I know that this isn't an uplifting story, and it's certainly not good news, but it is news, and it does deserve coverage. And it deserves coverage because it's an epidemic. It's an epidemic within our armed forces. That we lose so many people, so many lives, to a struggle with mental health. And it's heartbreaking. And it's tragic. And while the research in the report highlights things like financial strain and relationship problems, and I'm sure that those things are certainly factors, you have to know that a lot of what's going on here also has to do with the incredible weight and the incredible amount of stress and strain that's put on individuals who serve in active duty, who spend so much time away from family, away from their community, away from their support, away from their loved ones, who work very dangerous and very demanding jobs, who see things and have to do things and face things that most of us cannot imagine. And for some people, the weight of that combined with all these other factors is just too much to bear. And we've got to do better for those who serve us. Some of the best men and women that I know are people who are active duty, who are veterans, who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, who are National Guard members who have been called up not once but multiple times and had to leave for over a year at a time from their children, from their spouses. I can't imagine how difficult those circumstances are. And I don't know anyone who does serve that doesn't know someone who either took their own life that was in the service or who is struggling with overwhelming issues of PTSD or mental health struggles because of all the things that they've experienced and faced. And we've got to do better. We've got to offer more support to our veterans, to our servicemen and women. We've got to offer better mental health care and support. We've got to end the stigma that exists around mental health in our country. We've got to take better care of our service members when they come back home, when they exit the military, when they try to live life as a civilian again. Because it matters. These people matter. 580 people lost in a year to suicide. If you know someone who is deployed, if you know someone that has gotten called up, if you know someone that has returned home, check on your people. Pray for them. Let them know that you're thinking about them. Send good vibes their way. Write them a letter. Shoot them a text message. Support their family. Reach out to their family while they're gone. Let them know that you're there for them, that you'll cut the grass, that you'll help them with their bills, whatever it is that they need. We've got to be a better support to those that support us. This report is newsworthy because it's preventable and because it can be addressed. And it's not just a military thing, it's an us thing. It's a societal thing. And we've got to do better. We've got to do better. Lives are at stake. And I wanted to highlight this story and I wanted to share it so that you can become aware or be made more aware or be reminded of the crisis and the epidemic of suicide and mental health struggle in those that serve our country, in our veterans, in our young people, in our National Guard. And if you're struggling with suicidal thoughts or ideations, just know that you're loved. You might not feel it, you might not see it, you might feel like you're alone, but you're not alone. You're never alone, and you do matter, and you're made in the image of God, and you are loved, and you are appreciated. Hold on, because it will get better. No storm lasts forever. Seek help. Reach out to your family. Reach out to a therapist. Go see a counselor. I've done it. Everybody should probably do it. It's a good and healthy thing. Work on healthier routines. Call a suicide prevention hotline. If you have nobody else to talk to, call the hotline and talk to one of the trained professionals. Don't hold it in. Don't keep it to yourself. Get the help that you need. Check on the people that you care about. Find ways to support our troops that make a difference, that make a positive impact. And let's see if we can't turn this thing around little by little. Because we've got to. We've just got to. Our next story in the world of politics: Amazon pays for high school class about how to be an Amazon grunt. This is seriously dystopian. Yeah, my babies, we're going to talk about Amazon. Jeff Bezos. Bezos. I don't know. The guy that flies the rocket shaped like into space. Amazon is quietly funding high school classes that teach students how to work at Amazon in a California county where it's already the largest employer. According to documents provided to Motherboard, students at San Bernardino's Cajon High School have been offered a series of Amazon Pathways courses sponsored by the company since 2019. The courses feature a curriculum that teaches them, among other things, how to motivate employees without giving them raises, while also increasing worker efficiency. The $50,000 grant provided to the school also coaches Cajon High teachers on how to establish and develop an effective industry partnership with Amazon, according to the documents obtained by Motherboard. Students enrolled in the classes are also required to do work-based internships at Amazon or a different logistics company. While it's already dystopian enough that Amazon is funding employee training programs for minors inside a public high school, the location of the school is just as troubling as well. San Bernardino County and the neighboring Riverside County are home to 14 fulfillment centers, 2 air hubs, and more than 40,000 Amazon employees. The region's employee count has also doubled in just the past 4 years. While these types of business-sponsored classes are not unusual, it's particularly striking that Amazon is offering grants to kids living in a region where the cost of living is high, while the proportion of Amazon employees relying on government assistance is just as high as well. Beyond just driving home Amazon's values of customer obsession and delivering results, words that are painted on the walls of the classrooms, the courses also have lessons on managing unions and labor organizing. Given the company's staunch and obvious anti-union stances and actions, it's an unsettling thing to teach high school kids. Last year, journalist Erica Hayaska reported on visiting Cajon's Amazon incubator, tweeting at the time that the classroom was designed to emulate the inside of an Amazon factory. According to Hayaska, students were even encouraged to wear polos that resemble uniforms. On a class wall, Amazon's giant logo grinned across a yellow and green banner. The words customer obsession and deliver results were painted against a corporate-style yellow backdrop. Each teenager wore a company golf shirt emblazoned with the Amazon logo. While everything described in the documents Motherboard obtained is legal and above board, the courses are arguably as ethically dubious as the military recruiting at high schools. That practice has already been under close scrutiny for decades, with reports revealing how recruiters target students from poor backgrounds. Eric Nielsen, an economics professor at Cal State University San Bernardino, one of the institutions that helped develop the curriculum, told Motherboard that it's concerning students are essentially being exposed to Amazon propaganda inside what he calls a shrine to Amazon. Though it's not Amazon's first foray into education, the company has sponsored multiple STEM-boosting programs in middle and high schools. It is unique in that it teaches students specifically about how to work for Amazon in an area where the company has already saturated the job market. It's all very reminiscent of the 2018 surrealist black comedy Sorry to Bother You, but instead of company towns, Amazon is building company education. We can't say we weren't warned. Yeah. So Amazon out here, just buying a classroom, putting their slogans on the wall, dressing students in their uniforms, teaching them to be anti-union, and then requiring them to do internships at Amazon as well. Miss me with that garbage. Miss me with that BS, Jeff Bezos. I do not want to live as a citizen of the United States of Amazon, okay? Last time I checked, the A stood for America, not Amazon. This is just a bridge too far, in my opinion, and it makes me wholly uncomfortable. I would not want one of my children to go to a high school where Amazon is spewing their propaganda, has paid for a classroom, has given a grant in order to indoctrinate students into what it means to be an Amazon employee, teaching students how to maximize effort of employees without actually paying them well. Like, hey, this is not a good idea in my estimation. This is not a healthy environment for learning to me. This seems like some corporate capitalism gone amok insanity that you would find on an episode of Black Mirror. Not something that should be happening in a public high school. But it is. It's happening in California, of all places. Imagine that. And I haven't heard Gavin Newsom say anything about it. I haven't heard Nancy Pelosi say anything about it. And actually, I haven't even seen this story covered on any mainstream media. I found it on some internet blog sites, where even the economics professor at the university that helped put together this quote-unquote curriculum for Amazon is saying, probably not a good idea. And I concur. Probably not a good idea. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook. They buy what they want. They reach who they want. And at this point, there's very little we can do about it. And it's scary. It's a little bit alarming to me. Maybe you think this isn't a big deal. I would love to hear your thoughts on Amazon creating a propaganda course at a local public high school in California. Get at us on Twitter at InTheShed4. Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. And let me know what you think. Am I making a big deal of nothing? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Is this no big deal at all? This is just no different than a typical entrepreneurship or business class that's offered at a high school? Or are you like me and you think that this is not a healthy environment for impressionable young students? Because that's how I feel. And this is my show. So I share with you how I feel, my babies. But I would love to hear how you feel about it as well. Our last story in the world of politics: emotional support alligator cools off at Philadelphia's Love Park. That's right, my tools. We're going from one dangerous idea to another. You heard me correctly. Emotional support alligator cools off at Philadelphia's Love Park. Bystanders had an up-and-close personal encounter with an alligator in Philadelphia's Love Park. But the reptile isn't a wild beast. It's the emotional support animal of a Philadelphia man who runs several social media accounts documenting his loving relationship with Wally the alligator. And I'm going to hit pause on the article right there because it says the reptile is not a wild beast. And I beg to differ, because it's an alligator. It's not a kitty cat. It's not a puppy dog. It's a freaking alligator. It's the actual definition of a wild beast. But I digress. Onward. Several visitors to the park, as well as Wally's owner, Joey Henney, posted images and videos of the affable alligator, nice alliteration, on a leash, greeting visitors and wandering through the water sprayed by the fountain. Henney told CNN that he acquired Wally 6 years ago. A longtime reptile rescuer who has worked with alligators for 30 years, Henney was contacted by a friend working in Florida. There was an overabundance of gators in the area, Henney said. In Florida, so-called nuisance alligators must either be euthanized or transferred into captivity, he explains. Wally was removed from a lagoon in Florida, said Henney. His friend brought the baby gator, then just 20 inches long and a little over a year old, to Pennsylvania. Thus began a unique relationship between man and alligator. Wally has been quite different than any alligator I've ever dealt with in the past 30 years, said Henney. He doesn't show anger. He doesn't show aggression. He hasn't since the day he was caught. We never could understand why. I understand why he doesn't show anger or aggression, because he's an alligator. He doesn't show emotion like anger. He's an alligator. He's a wild animal. It's not that he doesn't show aggression. It's just that he hasn't shown it yet, my friend. I digress. Onward. He's just lovable. He sleeps with me, steals my pillow, steals my blankets. He's just awesome. Wally's easygoing personality led Henney to have the gator licensed as an emotional support animal. The alligator has provided comfort for him as he's undergone radiation treatments for cancer. Most people who see Wally are really excited and happy to see him, said Henney. Henney isn't concerned about the possibility of the alligator biting someone, he said. Wally is the only gator I've ever been around that refuses to bite, he said. It's mind-boggling, just hard to believe. Their visit to the Love Park came after the odd pair visited Philadelphia to film a news segment accompanied by his close friend Mary Johnson and her children, said Henney. Johnson helps film content for Wally's TikTok and Instagram, and her family is super special to me, Henney said. They must not be that special, Mr. Henney, if you're putting these children around the alligator. Surely that alligator's mouth is taped shut with some duct tape or some electrical tape to protect these children, if they're that important to you. Surely. They just had a blast, said Henney. People came as soon as they heard Wally was there to get a hug and get a photo with him. Henney hopes that Wally's story can help encourage people to be nice to other people. He's proud that Wally can help put a smile on people's faces. This world is rough enough, he says. The world is going to be rougher the day that Wally decides to eat somebody. I swear I've seen it all. An emotional support alligator. That isn't a wise idea to have an emotional support alligator. And I just don't understand the rationale here. I'm sorry that the man is suffering from cancer and having to deal with that. I hope that he is well and experiences wholeness and healing. I wish him nothing but good things. But it is not a good idea to have an alligator as an emotional support animal. It's just not a good idea, and I don't understand the rationale from someone who has allegedly worked with reptiles for over 30 years to have the attitude and to be so nonchalant that Wally is the one alligator in all of human history that isn't going to bite somebody, that isn't going to snap, that isn't ever going to show aggression, just because he hasn't yet, and because he's different, and he's kind, and he's a nice alligator. Hey, he's a wild animal, okay? Alligators cannot be domesticated. If you need emotional support from an animal, find you a lovely dog. Adopt you a dog. Get you a cat. Pet you a cat. Get you a parakeet that sits on your shoulder and chirps sweet nothings into your ear. But let me tell you what you probably shouldn't do. And that's put an alligator on a leash and walk it around in public and let random children hug it and pose with it for pictures. Because if this thing's mouth is not taped shut, eventually it will bite somebody. And if you do keep its mouth taped shut in public, but you sleeping in the bed with it at nighttime and letting it steal your covers and your pillow, it's a matter of time before he steal one of your fingers too. Okay. An alligator is not an emotional support animal. And I usually don't side with the fine people of PETA on anything. On anything. But I can't imagine that they are in agreement with this man's use of an alligator as an emotional support animal. That's not what alligators are designed to do. That's not what they are equipped for. That's not what their rows of sharp teeth are made for. And it's not fair to the alligator to have him in your bed and carried around and put on a leash and be out in public with these people. The man needs to be in a pond. Not the man in the story, the alligator. I called him a man, but Wally. Wally needs to be in a pond. I live in Alabama, okay? There are alligators in every body of water here besides the occasional swimming pool. Nuisance alligators are a thing, and when they are captured, they are taken somewhere. But that somewhere should be an alligator farm or some type of sustainable habitat for the alligator where it can still be an alligator. Not in your apartment or in your house where you just treat it like it's a dog. Because it's not a dog. And I'm far too riled up about this story. I feel far too strong about this story. But I worked for a while. There was a period of time, I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before or not. But when my wife was pregnant with our daughter, with our first child, there was a period of time where I worked 2 jobs. My wife and I both had jobs. I was working full time, but we didn't have health insurance, okay? And we made just enough money that we didn't qualify for government help with health insurance, but we didn't make enough money to be able to afford it on our own. We were in that sweet spot. Too rich for help, but too poor to afford it on our own. So I got a second job, because that's what you do when you need to take care of your spouse. And so I would work my full-time job, And then I would work the midnight shift from 12 at night till 6 in the morning at a gas station. And I've got a college degree, but I'm not above doing any work. Every job requires a certain level of skill and of work ethic. It's fine. It is what it is. I did it for about 6 months. It was very difficult. I would work from 12 to 6. I would go home. I would kiss my wife. I would eat some breakfast, take a 2-hour nap, and then I would go to my day job. And I did it for months. And at our gas station, we had some policies that we went over during training. And one of those policies that we had was that if anybody at any time comes through the doors with any type of animal, we were just to assume that it was an emotional support animal. And we were not to ask for any type of proof. But we were just to assume that that animal belongs in this gas station with that person. And I'm all for emotional support animals. I don't have a problem with that. Animals can be very helpful to people who have the need for such an animal. I'm all for it. But had I been working, mopping the floor of the gas station at 3 a.m., and this man walked into my store with Wally the alligator on a leash, I would have quit that night. Health insurance or not, I would have quit that night. Because that is absurd. And that's why we're covering it on our show. Because this is the news that you cannot get anywhere else other than this article on CNN. But you won't get this type of coverage of a story like this anywhere else than on our wonderful show. Take Wally to a pond. Let that man catch some fish and be an alligator. He's not a puppy. He's not built for that life. And he gonna take your finger. Okay. It's just a matter of time. And I hope that I'm wrong. But I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. That's all for the world of politics. Let's switch to this, the news in the world of sports. And let's hit the headline. Russell Wilson and Broncos agreed to $245 million extension. Serena Williams advances at the U.S. Open. Titans sign wide receiver Josh Gordon to practice squad. Steph Curry's number 30 jersey retired at Davidson. College football playoff expansion could come as early as 2023. Vanderbilt football dismisses 2 freshmen from their football team. R.J. Barrett finalizing extension with the New York Knicks. And finally, the Brooklyn Nets signed forward Markieff Morris to a 1-year deal. We're going to talk college football, but before we do, a little bit of NBA news. And the first is that we have a trade. Utah Jazz All-Star guard Donovan Mitchell has been traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Yeah, he gets the distinct pleasure of moving from Salt Lake City, Utah to Cleveland, Ohio. And you knew that this was going to happen. Not necessarily that Donovan Mitchell would go to the Cavs. I'm not even sure that I've heard them mentioned as one of the possible trade destinations. But we knew that the Jazz were going to trade Donovan Mitchell. They've been trying to for a while. They're in the beginning processes of a complete rebuild. They traded Rudy Gobert in the offseason to the Timberwolves. They're amassing first-round draft picks. I think now they have about 13 first-round draft picks over the next 5 years, something insane like that. They're doing their best Sam Presti impersonation, okay? And they traded Donovan Mitchell, their best player, to the Cleveland Cavaliers from the Western Conference to the Eastern. They get back a couple of guys that can play in Colin Sexton and in Lauri Markkanen, along with 3 unprotected first-round draft picks. But the interesting part about this trade to me is the roster that the Cleveland Cavaliers have now. Because they have a proven winner and a proven scorer and a proven playoff performer in Donovan Mitchell to go along with a young core featuring Darius Garland, Auburn's own Isaac Okoro, defensive ace Jarrett Allen, big man Evan Mobley, And then they have Kevin Love and Karis LeVert off the bench. That's a pretty good 7-man rotation right there. And I'm sure they have a couple of bench players and pieces that can play, but that's a pretty strong front 7 for an NBA basketball team. Cleveland was already interesting last year. They were a surprise team in the NBA. They're already on the come up, and now they've added someone like Donovan Mitchell, who will help their team tremendously, who will provide experience and leadership, and who will raise the level of play around him. And it's a move that for the Cavaliers I absolutely love. I'm not sure it helps make the Jazz any better, but the Jazz aren't trying to get better. The Jazz are trying to get in place to draft the guy with the name that I can't pronounce from overseas next year. They're trying to amass a bunch of first-round picks. They're starting over. So they accomplished what they want to in this trade, and the Cleveland Cavaliers have gotten a whole lot better and a lot more interesting. Also in the NBA, since the last time that we recorded a show, Kevin Durant has decided to stay in Brooklyn. And the saga of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and their stranglehold on the franchise in Brooklyn continues. This has been a roller coaster if you are a Brooklyn Nets fan. Are there Brooklyn Nets fans? Are there people that actually root for that team, or are there Kyrie Irving fans and Kevin Durant fans that have signed on to become Brooklyn Net fans? I don't know. There used to be a bunch of Net fans in New Jersey. Are there actually Brooklyn Net fans? The Nets have had a very interesting offseason. They've added pieces to their roster. They've signed Royce O'Neal and Markieff Morris, and a very underrated signing in signing TJ Warren coming off injury to a 1-year deal. If he's healthy, he's definitely a difference maker for them. And now it looks like they're going to keep both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Two guys that wanted out, two guys that caused headaches for that franchise. That very early on, when Steve Nash was hired, his coach said that they didn't need a head coach. Who Kevin Durant has put it out publicly that he wanted to trade because he no longer believes in the direction of the franchise under head coach Steve Nash and GM Sean Marks. And then owner Joe Tsai publicly backed both his head coach and his GM. And now Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are both going to be on that roster that has been remade and has been improved. The Nets will also get back guard Joe Harris, sharpshooter and underrated defender, back onto the roster from injury. And possibly, maybe even Ben Simmons will play a game or two. Possibly. So in addition to the Cavaliers with their trade, the Brooklyn Nets have just become a lot more interesting as well. What kind of season can they put together if Kevin Durant remains on that roster and if he's at all engaged? With the upgrades to the roster that they've made in free agency, if Kyrie Irving decides to actually show up to work, what kind of team can they put on the court? I think they might be better than 8th in the East. I'm just saying. I'm not going to be one of these people that predict them to be the best team in the league, that think they're going to win 55 games this next year, because we just haven't seen it on the court. Theoretically, this is a very good basketball team. But do they have enough grit? Do they have enough teamwork? Do they have any type of culture and leadership that's necessary to contend for a championship? I don't know. But I know that they have a lot of talent. And I know that if you're a Net fan, if those do exist, in fact, that you can at least take a deep breath and a sigh of relief for a year. The NBA just got a lot more interesting with this trade that the Cavs made today, and with the decision that Kevin Durant made a few days ago. And I'm not sure that I would want to be Steve Nash. Because here he has 2 star players, one who didn't want to show up to work at all and said we don't need a head coach, and the other who said I want to be traded because I don't believe in our head coach. And he gets the unenviable task of coaching both of those guys and having to rely on both of those guys who are supremely talented, but who lack leadership and who lack self-awareness, and who don't really make the best decisions when it comes to their professional career. And I don't think that's too harsh of a statement. I think the evidence bears out such a statement as fact. And look, I've been in Steve Nash's shoes in the sense that and you probably have too, we've all had instances where we work with people that we don't trust. and we just have to figure it out. And if he's going to remain an NBA coach, he's going to have to figure it out. Kevin Durant stays in Brooklyn. Very interesting. Moving on from the NBA to college football, I watched a few games before coming out to the shed and recording tonight. I saw Central Florida and Ole Miss transfer quarterback John Rice Plumlee put up 56 points in a 56-10 win over South Carolina State in the Bounce House in Orlando. My favorite former Auburn coach Gus Malzahn and company are now 1-0 with a meeting against Louisville at home next Friday. I watched Sean Clifford and Penn State pull out a 4-point win late against Purdue and then act as though they had won the national championship. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. I watched Missouri look like a bottom-tier SEC team against Louisiana Tech. And I watched a great game in the backyard brawl between Pittsburgh and West Virginia. A matchup with two former USC quarterbacks who have transferred to different schools. JT Daniels, who started out at USC and then went to Georgia. He's now at West Virginia, and he was slinging the ball all over the field for the Mountaineers. And then for Pittsburgh, to replace Kenny Pickett, they have the USC transfer Kedon Slovis. And it was a really good game. West Virginia outplayed Pittsburgh for much of the game. Pittsburgh made some plays late. They tie up the game. West Virginia is driving down the field. With a couple minutes left in the game, JT Daniels puts the ball right on his receiver, a very good receiver that had made a lot of plays for the Mountaineers. The ball goes through his hands into the arms of a defender who runs it back for a touchdown, and Pittsburgh wins the game. Absolute pandemonium. You have to love it if you're a Pittsburgh Panther fan, and if you are a Mountaineer fan, it is a tragic start to your football season. A lot of very interesting games are on tap this weekend. North Carolina visits App State in a game where the odds makers say it is even. Nebraska and North Dakota is all of a sudden an interesting game after Nebraska lost to Northwestern in Ireland. You have Army and Coastal Carolina, two very good mid-major programs matching up. Ohio State versus Notre Dame in the shoe. Boise State at Oregon State out west. And Florida State at LSU on Monday. But there are three games that I'm most interested in this weekend. Outside of the teams that I root for, outside of Auburn, who plays Mercer, outside of Kentucky, who plays Miami, Ohio, outside of Colorado, who's playing tomorrow night, there are three games that I'm most interested in watching. The first is the Chick-fil-A kickoff game in Atlanta that puts Georgia up against the Oregon Ducks. It's going to be a very interesting game. You have Bo Nix, presumably the starting quarterback for Oregon after transferring for Auburn against a team that he played every year while at Auburn in Georgia. You have Georgia, who's going to have to rely more on Stetson Bennett in the offense than they have in years past, with that Georgia D losing so many players to the NFL draft. And Oregon's coach is Dan Lanning, making his head coaching debut after Mario Cristobal bolted Oregon for Miami. Dan Lanning, who was the defensive coordinator for Georgia last season. So a lot of familiarity in this matchup, and a lot of interesting storylines. And not really a neutral field in Atlanta. It's going to be a home field advantage for the Georgia Bulldogs. And conventional wisdom says that Georgia won't have very much of an issue in facing an Oregon team that has a brand new head coach and a brand new quarterback. And I don't think that Oregon will be able to match up with Georgia on the offensive or defensive lines. Even though Georgia lost a lot of NFL players, they're still going to have a very physical and very good defense under Kirby Smart. They just are. It's who they are. It's what they do. They don't rebuild. They just reload. They have tons of guys who are all-world athletes. They have elite talent at every position. So conventional wisdom says that Georgia wins this game by a couple of touchdowns. But I'm definitely going to be tuning in. I'm definitely going to be watching. I want to see what happens in that game. I want to see how Bo Nix looks in an Oregon offense. I want to see how Stetson Bennett plays after winning a national championship. and what happens as Dan Lanning faces off against his former boss. Another game that I'm excited to watch is Cincinnati at Arkansas. Arkansas plays a couple of teams in their non-conference schedule that are actually very good football teams. They play both Cincinnati and BYU this season. Teams that are both ranked in our In the Shed with Wes Anderson top 25 poll. Our preseason poll, Cincinnati was ranked 19th. BYU was ranked 21st, I believe. And we had Arkansas 25th. The AP and the coaches poll have Arkansas as the higher ranked team in this matchup, but we had Cincinnati at 19 and Arkansas at 25. And this is going to be an interesting matchup. KJ Jefferson and Sam Pittman, what is their team going to look like for the Razorbacks this year? Is KJ Jefferson going to take that next step as an elite SEC quarterback? We know he can run. We know he can throw. We know he has a lot of talent. Is he going to be consistently elite this season? Meanwhile, Cincinnati, they're breaking in a new quarterback. They also lost several NFL bodies. They don't have the elite recruiting that a school like Georgia or Alabama has. They do have a very underrated head football coach in Luke Fickell. A coach that I don't understand how he has not gotten hired at one of these major programs. A head coach that has really built something special in Cincinnati. And they have a chance on the big stage to prove right away that they're not a one-hit wonder, that it wasn't a fluke for them to make the playoff last season. They have a chance to really set the tone for their season this year. And I want to see what happens. Arkansas is favored in this game. The stadium is going to be rocking. I expect Arkansas to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if Cincinnati kept it close, and I wouldn't be surprised if we got to the fourth quarter and it was anybody's game. The third game that I'm most interested in this weekend is Utah at Florida. Utah from the Pac-12, a team that is ranked in the top 10 in both polls that we have a little bit further back at 16th in the country, visiting the rebuilding Florida Gators. Utah is probably going to be the more physical team. I know that doesn't sound like something that's supposed to be said when you're talking about going up against an SEC team like Florida, but I think Utah will probably be the more physical team. Kyle Whittingham is a tremendous football coach. Utah quarterback Cameron Rising might be the best signal caller in all of the Pac-12. And they're a top 10 football team, a legitimate top 10 football team. And they're going up against Florida under Billy Napier in his Florida Gator debut in the Swamp. One of the hardest places to play in the country. And Florida has Anthony Richardson at quarterback, a guy that if you haven't seen play, you really need to tune in because he has otherworldly talent. He's a tremendous athlete, but the question for him is he a tremendous quarterback at this point in his career? He's got the physical ability. Does he have the playmakers around him? Is he ready to play a team like Utah? Can Florida upset the Utah Utes at home in the first game of the season and really set a tone for the rest of the year and put the SEC East on notice? I want to see what happens. So there's a lot of great games happening this weekend, but those are the three that I'm going to make sure and watch. Those are the three I'm most interested in. Georgia versus Oregon, Cincinnati at Arkansas, and Utah at Florida. One thing that we do during college football season here on In the Shed with Wes is we do our In the Shed with Wes Anderson Solid 7. This is the 7 games that we pick every week against the spread with a goal of ending the season with at least 53% correct. Because 53% is what you have to be in the money. Not to be stacking chips. Not to be making Jeff Bezos money. But just to be in the money. You got to have 53% correct. Last week in week 0, we went 4-3 on the weekend for a 57% weekend. Not tremendous, but I'll take it. It's a winning weekend nonetheless. And our options were pretty limited. There weren't that many games to choose from, and we had to pick 7. We took Northwestern plus 11 against Nebraska and Ireland. We were right there with Purple Vandy pulling it out 31-28 and winning outright against Nebraska. And Sky Frost is in trouble. Scott Frost is in trouble. That man, 21 of his 30 losses at Nebraska have been in one-possession games. And that says something about him as a head football coach. And Nebraska showed flashes. Their quarterback, the transfer from Texas, Casey Thompson, showed flashes. Their defense looked better at times. But they lost to Northwestern in Ireland. And they get off to an 0-1 start. And Scott Frost is on the hottest of all hot seats in America. We wrongly took Utah State minus 26.5 against UConn. Look, that was a big number. That was a very big number, but I thought Utah State might hit it. They won 11 games last year. UConn has been terrible. They looked a lot better under their first game with Jim Mora as head coach. Utah State did win 31-20, but they did not cover the spread. We also took Illinois minus 14 versus Wyoming. We were right there with Illinois winning 38-6. We wrongly thought that Charlotte would keep it close against Florida Atlantic. We took Charlotte plus 7. FAU blew them out 43-13. We were correct in taking North Texas minus 1.5 at UTEP. They won 31-13 there. We were also correct in taking Nevada minus 8.5 at New Mexico State. They covered just barely, winning the game 23-12. And we were so far off in taking Hawaii plus 9.5 points against Vanderbilt at home. Vanderbilt won 63-10. I don't remember the last time I saw Vanderbilt hang 63 points on anybody. Like you could have given me plus 9.5 with Vanderbilt going against my middle school team here in our town. And I would have thought real long and hard about it. Because that's how bad Vanderbilt football has been. But they looked good. They looked good. Timmy Chang has a tough job at Hawaii. I'm rooting for him to turn things around there at his alma mater. But Vanderbilt won that game going away 63-10. We were wrong there. 4-3 on the weekend to start us off, 57%. Our first week 0, was a winning weekend. And this week we're hoping to do even better. And this is who we're taking this week. We're taking Kentucky minus 17 at home versus Miami, Ohio. Star running back Chris Rodriguez will be serving a suspension for the Wildcats and will not be playing, but they're very deep at the running back position. Quarterback Will Levis is expected to have a big year, as are the Kentucky Wildcats. There will be a talent disparity. The crowd will be robust, and I expect Kentucky to win that one going away. We picked them to cover the spread there. We're also taking the Houston Cougars minus 4 on the road against one of my favorite stories from last year, the UTSA Roadrunners. If you listened to the show last football season, you may remember that our poll, the In the Shed with Wes Anderson college football rankings, were one of the first polls in the country to have the Roadrunners ranked, and we ranked them higher, more consistently than any other poll. They had a tremendous season last year. But this year we have Houston ranked number 7 in the country coming into the year. I think that Houston has a very decent chance of going undefeated in the regular season. They missed both Central Florida and Cincinnati. They're not on their schedule this year. But this could be a trip-up game. This could be a trap game for the Cougars starting out. This is one of their more dangerous matchups, but even so, I'm going to take Houston to cover the spread because I think that their defensive line will make the difference. Houston is very big and very experienced up front. I think that their defensive line will wreak havoc in the Roadrunner backfield. I'm taking Houston minus 4. We're also taking San Diego State minus 6 at Arizona. We expect that San Diego State, who is a very good football team, will take it to one of the worst teams in the Pac-12. I'm taking BYU minus 12 at a South Florida team that I expect to be better, that might hang around, but I think that the Cougars can cover there. We're also taking FAU minus 3.5 at Ohio. Florida Atlantic, who I underestimated last week, I'm rolling the dice and going with the Owls. I'm going with the Owls this week. I'm betting on a football team whose mascot is an owl. Don't let me down, Florida Atlantic. I'm also picking Hugh Freeze and the Liberty Flames minus 3.5 at Southern Miss. And South Carolina minus 12 at home against Georgia State. I think Spencer Rattler and company will have too much offense for Georgia State and will be able to cover the spread there. Those are our In the Shed with Wes solid 7 picks this week. Kentucky minus 17, Houston minus 4, San Diego State minus 6, BYU minus 12, FAU minus 3.5, Liberty minus 3.5, and South Carolina minus 12. We're taking favorites. We're taking favorites this week. We're rolling the dice, and we're going to try to have back-to-back winning weekends. The goal is 53%. And last year, I think the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season, we had winning weekends. And we were doing really well. We were in the high 50-something%. And then we crashed and burned. We had a disastrous 3 or 4 week stretch to end the year last year. We recovered a little bit in the bowl season, and we wound up at about 46% on the year. We did not make any money. We did not meet our goal. But this is the year, my babies. This is the year it's going to happen. In year 2, we're ready to go. Those are the picks. Get out your notepad. Get out your phone. Put them in. I'm not suggesting you bet any money based on our picks. But you can if you want to. You can if you want to. And we'll see how we do. That's all the news in the world of sports. Let's switch this to news in the world of the paranormal. And our first story takes us to Florida. Because of course it does. Because why wouldn't we start out the paranormal news with a Florida man story? That's right. Florida man drives to Space Force Base to warn the government about U.S. aliens fighting with Chinese dragons. Yeah, there's so much here. We're talking Space Force, we're talking aliens, and dragons of a Chinese variety. A Florida man has been arrested for attempting to break into the Patrick Space Force Base using a stolen truck to warn the U.S. government of a war between aliens and Chinese dragons. And before I proceed with the article, I'm just going to go ahead and go out on a very sturdy, very large limb and say that possibly drugs may be involved in this story. Corey Johnson, 29, of Ocala, Florida, was arrested on Friday. His arrest affidavit noted that he stole a 2013 Ford F-150 3 days before driving to the Patrick Space Force Base located in Brevard County. Johnson reportedly admitted to Brevard County deputies that he stole the vehicle while at Riviera Beach and did not know who the owner was. According to his arrest affidavit, Johnson said he was ordered by President Biden in his head to steal the truck and to drive it to the Space Force Base to warn the government about U.S. aliens fighting with Chinese dragons. The Florida man who has been booked into Brevard County Jail was charged with grand theft of a motor vehicle. His bond was reportedly set at $3,000. And that's all the information that we get in this article. And I feel like it's not enough because I have so many questions remaining. How is President Biden communicating with this man in his mind? Is the man doing some remote viewing? Does President Biden have the ability of telepathy? What race of aliens are fighting these Chinese dragons? And what kind of drugs was this man on? There may or may not be a war going on between extraterrestrial beings and Chinese space dragons. I'm going to go with the may not. I'm going to push my chips into the center of the table and go with probably not. But nonetheless, this is a funny story, and if this man is on drugs or is experiencing some type of mental health crisis, I hope that he gets the help that he needs. But it probably wasn't a good idea, no matter what President Biden was telling you in your head, inside your dome, to steal an F-150 and drive to a Space Force base to warn them about the alien war with Chinese dragons. Maybe just stay at home. Maybe just watch some Netflix or scroll TikTok on your phone. Maybe write this stuff down and make it into a graphic novel that I would pay money to read, okay? But probably don't steal an F-150 from the beach and drive it to a Space Force base because President Biden was telling you to do so in your mind. Not the best idea, but a pretty funny story. From Florida to Oklahoma we go for our next story. Oklahoma man says Bigfoot made him kill his fishing partner, police say. That's right, my babies. We're going from space aliens and Chinese dragons and a telepathic President Biden to Bigfoot making a man kill his fishing partner, allegedly. A day out-hand fishing for catfish on the South Canadian River in Pontotoc County, Oklahoma, has turned into a murder investigation after a man claims Bigfoot forced him to kill his friend. Larry Sanders, no relation to the colonel, 53, stands charged with first-degree murder after allegedly admitting first to a family member and later to police to killing his noodling fishing partner Jimmy Knighton, who Sanders claimed wanted him dead by the hand of the mythical monster Bigfoot. Noodling is a popular fishing technique used in southern United States to catch a fish by sticking one's hand in its mouth. Yeah, I'm from Alabama. I know what noodling is. You just basically you stick your arm underneath some rocks and in some places that fish might be up inside their mouth, and you grab a hold of them and you pull them up out the water like a bear. That's noodling. The local sheriff, John Christian, told local media that Sanders appeared to be under the influence of something when he told police that he had struck, strangled, and then drowned Knighton. And that is not a good fishing trip. So his statement was that Mr. Knighton had summoned Bigfoot to come and kill him, and that's why he had to then kill Mr. Knighton, Christian told local reporters. Christian said that the confession always makes it easier, but that the difficulty came in trying to find Knighton's body, which had floated on the river currents and was not discovered until more than 24 hours after the deadly incident. Christian said authorities first arrested Sanders on an outstanding warrant and charged him with murder only after Knighton's body was retrieved from the riverbed. You still have to prove all the elements of the crime and what the suspect is telling you. You have to prove that that's actually what happened, Christian said. Christian said the local prosecutor would likely push for the death penalty if Sanders is found guilty of the case. So, this man claims that his fishing partner summoned Bigfoot to come and kill him. What does it mean to summon Bigfoot? Was his fishing partner out here doing like some of these Bigfoot calls and yelps and yodel type noises that we see on all of these television programs? Was he building a tree structure? Did Mr. Knighton, like President Biden, have the ability of telepathy? And was he communicating with Bigfoot in his mind? Again, I'm going to go with probably not. As much as we are interested in Bigfoot on this program and in evidence that exists that this cryptozoological creature may in fact be real and maybe some type of undiscovered ape that's natural to the habitat of North America, I don't think that a Bigfoot was actually involved in this incident in rural Oklahoma. I'm just going to guess that Bigfoot wasn't involved. And I think that this guy, who was allegedly under the influence of something, might have been under the influence of something. And if you learn nothing else from tonight's program, learn this. That like Mr. Mackey told us, drunks are bad, okay? Drugs are bad. Drugs are bad, okay? Because they are. Because you might just get some ideas in your head like steal an F-150 and drive to the Space Force base. Or that your fishing partner who's got his arm elbow deep into the mouth of a largemouth bass is telepathically communicating with a Bigfoot to come and kill you. And I feel bad for Mr. Knighton and for his family and for the loss and the tragedy there. But how could we not cover a story involving true crime and Bigfoot and noodling on our show? Because we give you the news. We give you the news that nobody else gives you. We give you the things that are happening. And in rural Oklahoma, a fishing trip can turn deadly. You can go from noodling to murder in the blink of a drug. In the blink of a drug. And how dare you not only take a life, sir, but try to bring Bigfoot into it, allegedly. From a river in Oklahoma, we go to my living room for our next story. Yeah, not my shed in the backyard, but my living room. Because one thing that I like to do on this show from time to time, and that you, the viewer, have asked for, as a part of our paranormal segment of the show, is for us to do movie and television reviews occasionally that are of the paranormal, horror, or sci-fi variety. And I finally got around to watching a movie, one that I had hoped to catch in theaters but just didn't quite make it. The wife and I decided to watch a movie when the kids went to bed the other night, and we saw the movie Nope. The movie Nope. Not Leslie Nope, okay? Not Pawnee, but the Jordan Peele movie Nope. And I'd like to give you my thoughts on that film and my review of it. So fair warning, if you're listening to this podcast, if you've made it this far in tonight's journey in episode 50, and you haven't seen the movie Nope and you would like to see it, maybe fast forward to the last story that comes after this one. Because there will be some spoilers, okay? Nope is a 2022 horror/sci-fi film written, directed, and co-produced by Jordan Peele. It stars Daniel Kaluuya, Keke Palmer, Stephen Yeun, Michael Wincott, and Brandon Perea. It has a runtime of 2 hours and 15 minutes. It got a score of 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb and a very respectable 83% positivity rate on Rotten Tomatoes. Two siblings running a horse ranch in California discover something wonderful and sinister in the skies above, while the owner of an adjacent theme park tries to profit from the mysterious otherworldly phenomenon. Do. Phenomenon. Do. Phenomenon. Do. Da. I would get emails if we didn't do that. Shout out to Dave and Tim. It is a sign of respect and a tip of the cap to those guys, not me stealing their material. I can't be more clear about that. So I really liked this movie. I found it to be very enjoyable. I thought the acting was phenomenal. Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer and Stephen Yeun were all terrific in this movie. And like most Jordan Peele movies, I really liked the visual effects. I liked the camera angles. I liked the way that it was shot. The cinematography was very, very well done. And this movie to me struck an interesting balance between being a good sci-fi movie, like a legitimately good sci-fi movie, with all the things that you want and expect to see from a good sci-fi movie, while also presenting cultural commentary, but doing so in a way that doesn't come across as cheesy, doesn't come across as forced or as preachy. And basically, you have Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer, who are siblings that live on a horse ranch. They sell horses. They train horses for Hollywood films. And their father dies mysteriously from stuff falling from the sky, from debris the authorities think must have fallen from an airplane. And he dies tragically early on in the movie. And then later in the movie, as the brother and sister are dealing with the grief and struggling to make it and to keep this horse farm going, they see something in the sky, some sort of UFO. And the way that it appears and the interactions that they have with it and the way that things are shot, it's very suspenseful and very mysterious and a little bit even creepy. And one thing that Jordan Peele is famous for is that his movies have a little bit of a twist. It's not quite the M. Night Shyamalan type of twist, but a twist nonetheless. And there is one of those twists in this movie when we find out that the UFO is not a ship, but is actually a creature. It's some type of extraterrestrial flying monster that is hovering over their farm. And Daniel Kaluuya in this movie, who is an animal wrangler who trains horses, he gets the idea that maybe this thing can be interacted with in a similar fashion. And so you have this situation where Keke Palmer and Daniel Kaluuya are trying to make a name for themselves to fix their financial struggle, to get notoriety. Keke Palmer is insistent that they're going to get the money shot. They're going to be the people that get the Oprah shot and get evidence on camera of a UFO. And so they start to try to do that, and they discover this thing is not just a UFO, but it's some type of monster. And things go awry, and things get hairy, and people and horses get eaten by this monster, and it gets this climactic scene in the end where it appears as though everyone dies except for Keke Palmer, only to learn that her brother has survived also. And they've done all of this work, and they've gone through all of this stress and strain and have worked so hard to get their money shot. And Keke Palmer finally does at the end. And she doesn't even look at the picture. She's instead focused on the fact that this whole thing is over, that the monster has been defeated. She's making eye contact not with this picture that she's worked so hard for, but instead with her brother who has apparently survived. And I really thought this movie did a good job of being a legitimate sci-fi movie, but also having a component of cultural commentary. Because to me, and this is just a deduction that I got from this movie and what it spoke to me, but to me, it kind of was saying and communicating through story that the monster all along was not this thing in the sky, but the monster was this insistence on spectacle. This insistence that we have in our culture of monetizing tragedy, of putting harsh realities of life on camera in order to get all eyes focused on you, in order to climb up to this mountain, to get likes, to get clicks, to get dollars. And it kind of said that the spectacle of it all is in fact the monster, that in our society we have this desire for fame and for wealth and for notoriety, and this insistence on making all of our lives a public spectacle, that is the monster that hangs over our society. And in the end, when the monster was defeated, Keke Palmer no longer was interested in getting the fame and the notoriety that came from the picture that she was after all along. Instead, she just wanted to be present with her family, with her brother. So I would love to hear what you got out of this film. If you drew different conclusions than I did. To me, that's what the movie was about, really. That's what it was communicating and what it was saying. That was the underlying theme that I saw present within the film. And I enjoyed it. I really did. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as a sci-fi movie. I enjoyed it as a commentary on our American culture. And I thought it was very well done in both regards. Some people might not have enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm a Jordan Peele fan. I think he's one of the more creative and one of the more talented directors that we have in the game today. And if I'm giving this movie a rating from 1 star to 5, with 1 star being this was a complete waste of time, why did I ever watch it, and 5 stars, this is a perfect film with no flaws, I would give it a 4.375. That's what I would give it. I would give it a 4.375 stars out of 5. I thought it was very well done, very well executed. I really enjoyed the concept, and I liked the movie. It had a runtime of 2 hours and 15 minutes, but I found myself engaged throughout. I found myself really enjoying the characters and the arc that was told, the twists and turns of the stories, the suspenseful moments. I just thought it was a good movie. What did you think? If you've seen Nope, what did you think? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. I would love to hear from you. What would you rate this movie out of 5 stars? Would you rate it lower than us, higher than us? Did you enjoy it? Did you like it? Were you disappointed? Get at us and let us know. But I would give it a 4.375 stars out of 5, which either is the highest we've given a movie on this show or at least is pretty close, because I really enjoyed it and I thought it was well done. From my living room, we go to the world of conspiracy and true crime for our final story of the week, the untold conspiracy of the Smiley Face murders. Serial killers are terrifying. Crimes of passion are comprehensible because we can at least see the human emotion behind them, but the well-planned and calmly executed crimes of a serial killer are so horrifically foreign to normal people that they fascinate. That's one reason why serial killers are so often the subjects of thrillers and horror stories. The idea that we could be targeted by a killer for reasons beyond our understanding is chilling. And it really is chilling when I'm sitting out here in the complete darkness of my shed, with only my laptop light to shine away. I don't even have the 50-foot extension cord plugged in tonight. And I'm all alone at 1 a.m. on a Thursday evening in my backyard reading about serial killers. But I digress. We take comfort in the fact that society usually detects these insane people, or at least their patterns. We may never know who the Zodiac killer really was, for example. Yeah, we do. It was Ted Cruz. But we know that their activities stopped at a certain point in time because we saw their pattern. But according to a small group of law enforcement professionals, there's a prolific serial killer or group of killers working in the U.S. right now who are so subtle and so good at what they do, they're practically invisible. Retired New York City police detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, joined by criminal justice professor Dr. Lee Gilbertson, believe that a group of serial killers have been murdering young men around the country and making their deaths look like accidental drownings. The FBI and other experts have dismissed their claims as a conspiracy theory. The details are blood-curdling, and true or not, the story of the Smiley Face murders is one of the most terrifying things you'll hear about today. As Rolling Stone reports, the Smiley Face murder story begins in 1997. That year, Fordham University student Patrick McNeil walked out of the Dapper Dog in New York City on the Upper East Side and disappeared. According to the Fordham Observer, McNeil became extremely intoxicated, throwing up in the bar's bathroom, and went outside to wait for a ride home with a friend. When the friend failed to appear, he was last seen walking towards the subway station, followed by a van that had been double parked on the street outside. Detective Kevin Gannon caught the case, and a month later, McNeil's body was found floating in the East River. The medical examiner called the death an undetermined drowning, citing his high blood alcohol level, implying a drunken McNeil simply fell into the river and drowned. But Gannon was convinced that it was clearly a murder. There's evidence that Patrick McNeil was bound and abused before drowning. His body exhibited signs of having been dead before being placed in the river as well. Gannon swore to McNeil's parents that he would continue the investigation. He was joined by fellow detective Anthony Duarte and eventually criminal justice professor Lee Gilbertson in the belief that McNeil was in fact a murder victim. For more than 20 years, the trio have compiled evidence they believe indicates that Patrick was the first known victim of the Smiley Face killers. Lots of at-large serial killers get a nickname. Jack the Ripper, the Zodiac Killer, the Golden State Killer, Son of Sam. These nicknames usually come from some detail of their crimes, and the Smiley Face killers are no different. According to the Daily Beast, while investigating the growing number of deaths they believe are linked to a single serial killer or coordinated group of killers, retired police detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte noticed a creepy detail. At every location of a victim, there was a smiley face of some sort painted on a visible nearby landmark. In fact, Gannon and Duarte claimed that there are no fewer than 13 symbols commonly found near the location where alleged victims of the Smiley Face killers have been found. As Rolling Stone notes, however, the smiley face is actually one of the most common graffiti tags in the country, and the faces noted by Gannon and Duarte vary significantly in style, format, and even apparent date of application. Since bodies float, it's impossible to state with any real accuracy precisely where one will be spotted, which leads many law enforcement experts to dismiss the idea that a serial killer or group of killers would be taunting police with smiley face graffiti. One of the more compelling aspects of the smiley face killer theory is how similar most of the victims are, which supports the idea that the killer is targeting a specific type of person. As the Daily Beast reports, the victims are all young men attending college. They generally get good grades and have professional aspirations. They're usually athletic and popular, they're usually white, and they have almost always been out drinking at bars with friends prior to their disappearance. Some of the more recent victims that investigators have linked to the smiley face killers have been openly gay. This consistency in the victims certainly supports the theory that one person or group of people is behind their deaths. On the other hand, as the nonprofit Center for Homicide Research has pointed out, alcohol would also explain why a young man would become confused and fall into a river and drown. Young men are statistically shown to be more likely to engage in risky behaviors, especially when alcohol is involved. In other words, since binge drinking and going home alone is not uncommon for young men, it's not surprising that they are overrepresented in drowning deaths. Still, the idea that a serial killer is going after young popular students with bright futures is especially horrifying and definitely adds to the compelling nature of the theory. What really sets the theory behind the smiley face killers apart from other stories about serial murders is the belief that it's not a single killer. Former detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, along with criminal justice professor Lee Gilbertson, believe the smiley face killings are in fact being conducted by a large coordinated group of people. As reported by Heavy, Gannon believes there may be more than 1,000 people involved, broken up into cells of 12 to 15 different cities. As the Seattle Times notes, this would explain how some of the victims identified by Gannon and Duarte went missing on the same day in different cities. He also theorizes that membership in this murderous gang might change over the years as some members age out or die and others are recruited. If Gannon is correct, acting as a group would also help confuse any investigation, as law enforcement would naturally assume a single perpetrator and be thrown off the scent if different people were involved, especially if they had no connection to the victims. Frighteningly, Gannon notes that the smiley face killers have become more active in the last few years. He theorizes that this is because law enforcement has failed to take them seriously, and so the group is feeling more secure and confident in their ability to kill with impunity. Serial killing is hard work. It involves selecting a target, surveilling them, kidnapping them, or choosing a place to commit the deed, and then possibly staging the scene or constructing some other calling card. The most prolific serial killer on record is Louis Garavito. According to Britannica, Garavito confessed to killing 140 people, mostly poor children, and was convicted of 189 murders. He's currently serving an 835-year prison term. If Kevin Gannon, Anthony Duarte, and Lee Gilbertson are right, the smiley face killers puts Garavito to shame. According to Rolling Stone, the investigators have a database that identifies an astonishing 335 possible victims based on the profile they've developed and the physical characteristics of the crime scenes. It should be noted that Gannon, Duarte, and Gilbertson admit that these are possible victims. There's no way to prove that these deaths are in fact linked. The circumstantial evidence is compelling, however. The victims in the database exhibit many characteristics that hint they spent a significant time outside the water before being discovered, and many of the post-mortem examinations show similar toxicology reports and the presence of land insects that wouldn't be found in the water. What's frightening is that even if the investigators are only 50% correct, we're still talking about one of the most prolific serial killers in history. TV shows make forensic science seem a lot more advanced and reliable than it actually is. One example is how easily and accurately forensic scientists can determine precise causes of death. In reality, we live in a world where the term undetermined drowning gets used a lot. As the International Journal of Psychiatry and Clinical Practice explains, it's possible to conclude that someone drowned but have no hint as to why. Forensic experts often can't tell if someone drowned by accident, for example being very inebriated and falling into a river, or due to another cause. As Rolling Stone notes, almost all of the deaths that former detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte believe are connected to the smiley face killer have been ruled either accidental or undetermined drownings. The use of undetermined usually means there's no clear evidence of foul play. Gannon and Duarte argued that circumstantial similarities between the crimes and the physical evidence indicates that the drownings weren't accidents. For example, some of the victims have been found weeks after they disappeared, but appear to have been in the water for a much shorter period of time. If these cases were classified as homicides, the police would be forced to investigate. Others argue that medical examiners know their business, and the reason they don't rule the deaths that way is because there's simply no evidence to support the theory. In many of the deaths that Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte linked to the Smiley Face Killer, a van has been spotted near where the victim was last seen alive, which means it's possible that one of the Smiley Face Killer's victims was targeted twice, which also means the killers aren't easily scared. As reported by the Daily Beast, a young man named Dakota James contacted his friend Shelley on December 15, 2016. It was late, and James was very drunk after going out with coworkers to a bar. He was confused and upset about something. When she tracked him down, she saw a visibly confused James walking toward an SUV that was sitting facing the wrong way in the street. Shelley intervened and got James home safely. 5 weeks later, James disappeared. Once again, he'd gone out to drink with his friends. 40 days after he disappeared, his body was found floating in the Ohio River. According to Gannon and Duarte, smiley face graffiti was found a short distance away, and there's evidence that James was drugged and strangled prior to being drowned. The coroner disagreed, ruling his death an accident. But if Gannon and Duarte are right, that means the killer or killers were thwarted and seen by a witness, but patiently continued to wait for their opportunity to murder Dakota James. While former NYPD detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, along with criminal justice academic Lee Gilbertson, have compiled an impressive amount of evidence implying that hundreds of drowning victims were actually murdered by a cabal of serial killers working as a team, it's all circumstantial. There's no direct evidence that these deaths are linked, much less caused by a single group or individual. In fact, in 2008, after Gannon and Duarte's investigation had been going on for more than a decade, the Federal Bureau of Investigation took a look. Their conclusion was simple. They found no link between the deaths, and most of the drownings were in fact accidental. In 2010, the nonprofit Center for Homicide Research performed an in-depth study of the smiley face killings, and also conducted that it was little more than a conspiracy theory. For their part, Gannon and Duarte believe there is a fundamental disconnect between law enforcement and forensic professionals. As Rolling Stone reports, Duarte says that the medical examiner and the police are each waiting for the other to provide evidence of homicide, and as a result, these cases simply get pushed aside by more urgent investigations. The evidence of homicide is never officially collected as a result, and everyone simply accepts that the drowning was accidental. If the smiley face killers are real, there's one good reason it's been so hard to produce real evidence of the coordinated serial killing. According to the Daily Beast, they apparently use the dark web to organize and communicate. The dark web is a network of websites that require a special web browser using the anonymous Tor protocol to access. While many people use the dark web in order to preserve their privacy, it's known that many criminal organizations also use the dark web in order to freely sell illicit things like weapons or drugs, or to trade illegal information. That makes the dark web perfect for a gang of killers to recruit more members, identify victims, and coordinate actions. According to former detective Kevin Gannon, he and his fellow investigators once got close to one of these websites. He was given a dark web address, but when he accessed the site, he faced a password prompt and a demand that he turn on his camera so the site's administrators could see who was there. He didn't have the password and wouldn't have agreed to turn on the camera in any event. As detractors of the theory point out, this also means there's no actual evidence that any of these dark web sites exist. Like the smiley face killer gang itself, they exist only in theory, for now. All of the young men who Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte believed to be victims of the smiley face killers were out drinking before they disappeared, but the two retired police detectives believe there's another substance involved as well. GHB, a notorious date rape drug. As WebMD explains, GHB is colorless and tasteless and can cause extreme sedation and complete memory loss. Its lack of taste and color make it very easy to slip into someone's drink. According to E! Online, GHB has been found in about 30 of the drowning victims linked to the smiley face killers, but Gannon and Duarte think the number is much, much higher. They told Rolling Stone the number is probably closer to 99.9% of the cases. The problem, they explain, is that GHB isn't usually included in toxicology reports. This has led many families to authorize private toxicology scans, which have revealed the presence of the drug. Complicating this is the fact that although GHB is illegal except under very specific medical uses, it's still a common recreational party drug. It's not at all impossible that the victims voluntarily used the drug and that their inebriation as a result contributed to their accidental deaths. Perhaps the creepiest detail to emerge from the investigation conducted by Gannon and Duarte is the fact that many of the bodies appear to have been staged. As they write in the book they published in support of their theories, Case Studies in Drowning Forensics, one example is the body of Tommy Booth, who vanished in January 2008. His body was found 2 weeks later face down in the water with his arms folded neatly under him. Sticks had been pushed into the soft dirt at strategic places to hold his body in place, making the possibility that his body had been purposefully posed and placed in that spot very clear. As Oxygen notes, there are other examples. Todd Gieb was found posed to look as if he were out for a swim, and Chris Jenkins was found floating in the Mississippi River on his back with his arms crossed over his chest. As Gannon, Duarte, and Gilbertson note in their book, the chances that these poses were accidental are very slim, and the chances that these sticks holding Booth's body in place became wedged there naturally are extremely low. All the evidence points to the bodies being staged in various ways. According to the Daily Beast, Kevin Gannon, Anthony Duarte, and Lee Gilbertson have people they suspect are part of the Smiley Face gang, but they won't say who they are. That leaves the purpose of the group, if it exists, a mystery. Theories as to why a group of people are targeting and killing young men with bright futures vary, but one stands out in terms of sheer horror. As noted by Oxygen, one leading theory is that the murders are part of a gang initiation rite, similar in some ways to the old urban legend that gang initiates drive around at night with their headlights off, charged with killing the first person to flash their lights at them. The idea is to prove your loyalty and willingness to do whatever you're asked, even if it means killing an innocent stranger. This theory would explain the consistent profile of the victims, as the ritualistic nature of the killings would be an important component. It might also explain the graffiti, as the initiates tagging the scene to prove to the gang that they committed the crime. There's no evidence that this is the case, of course, but it's a terrifying thought. So, the conspiracy theory of the Smiley Face killers. What do you make of this story, my tools? What do you think the chances are that this is in fact a real thing? Do you believe that the circumstantial evidence put together by these former law enforcement officers and this professor are valid? Do they present a good case, or is it all just coincidental? Are there in fact a whole lot of accidental drowning deaths where young men go to bars, have too much to drink, and happen to fall into a river? Or is the fact that GHB has shown up in their bloodstream a lot of the time, and the fact that some of the bodies appear to be staged, does that lead you to believe that this was done intentionally? That there's a serial killer or a group of people working together, some type of cabal of evil, to target young men and to take their life and to make it look like an accident? It's a truly creepy idea. And if there hasn't already been a horror film made about it, I think it would be a very terrifying movie. And I don't put it outside the realm of possibility, because these kinds of things happen in our world. And it would be very easy for such crimes to appear accidental, and for evidence to be overlooked, and for the assumption that it was an accident and a terrible tragedy to be run with, rather than an investigation launched that points to something even more sinister. I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily believe that this is a real thing. I would like to see some hard evidence, but there's some parts of this story that are definitely interesting, and they definitely make you think. The toxicology reports are something. And the fact that some of these bodies show evidence that they have only been in the water for a little bit of time, a fraction of the amount of time that these people have been missing and that these young men had died. They've been dead for 3 weeks, but evidence shows that they've only been in the water for a couple of days. It's certainly interesting. And it certainly creates an atmosphere where conspiracy and mystery are attractive. I'm not really sold, but I'm not certain that it's false either. And I might have to check out the book that these gentlemen, these law enforcement officers have put together about the smiley face killers. What do you think? Email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com and let us know. Get at us on Twitter at intheshed4. What are the odds that this is in fact a real thing? And that these guys have cracked the case and they found discrepancies that link these accidental drownings together and prove that they're in fact murders? Do you buy it? How much stock do you put in it? And one thing is for sure, true or not, fact or fiction, the idea itself is creepy and is terrifying. And that's the reason we included it on the show. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 50. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, the Good Pods app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to follow us on Twitter at InTheShed4. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, talk some college football, and investigate together the existence of the demon shark. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scouts. Meemaw, we made it!